retail cannabis sales creates new jobs and new tax revenue. We are now in our 6th year with retail sales in Massachusetts under our belts. I would like to essentially, I would like to provide a rational approach and clear view on what has actually occurred. I would like to welcome David O'Brien here with us tonight. David represents the Massachusetts Cannabis Business Association, which is essentially similar and the same thing as a chamber of commerce for cannabis businesses, including independent operators. So, David, can you help us take an honest look at the facts?
Sure, I'd love to. Thank you, everyone, for welcoming me to Newburyport. A little bit of history. Can everyone hear me?
It can be a little bit louder.
How about now?
It can be a little louder.
Now?
Move it closer to your face, maybe.
How about now? Better? So just a little bit of history about cannabis legalization in Massachusetts. If those of you who've lived here for quite some time remember, on the presidential general election ballot of 2008, Massachusetts passed decriminalization, which allowed folks to use and possess cannabis. On the presidential ballot in 2012, we passed medical use. And on the presidential ballot of 2016, we passed adult use, also known as recreational use. At that time, the governor, the Senate president, and the speaker said in about December of that year, after the voters said we're going to do this by a 53% to 47% margin, let's take a little time and put some greater guardrails on this. So the legislature took about 6 months and built what we call enabling legislation around the ballot question. Governor Baker signed the the enabling legislation in late July of 2017. The first 5 commissioners were named, I believe, September 1st of 2017. The first hire was Sean Collins, who is the executive director, who is still the executive director of the Cannabis Control Commission. And he and they have built an agency that has about 100 people working there now. They oversee and regulate the legal cannabis economy, if you will. They also oversee the medical program, which used to be overseen by the Department of Public Health. And to Jenny's point, we know a whole lot more than we did back in 2016 and 2017. I know we may expect some elected officials and also some citizens to attend tonight. I've actually been to Newburyport before. Bruce and I first met when I came here. I was working for a company called Weedmaps, which is a tech company that lists cannabis operations, sort of a finder site. I had presented to the city council and at a public meeting, so I've been working on this policy matter for quite some time, and we put something together known as the Developing Local Cannabis Policy in Massachusetts, a primer for elected officials and staff across the Commonwealth. What's in here really hasn't changed about how you're going to approach it. What has changed is the market has grown here, stores have opened, the sky has not fallen, and what the fears were not realized in short. I put handouts on your chairs, so feel free to reference that as I go through this. I did this first slide to show you just how massive the growth has been in Massachusetts. So the first slide is that map of Massachusetts broken down by county. We don't do a lot by county here. We used to have very robust county government, but this is how the commission divides the licenses for reporting purposes. You'll see that the grand total for retail licenses as of their February 9th meeting was 469. That's not the number of open licenses. That's the number of licenses that they have decided on and given at least provisional licensure to. the number of actual open retail establishments across the Commonwealth currently sits at 267. The first 2 stores opened late November of 2018. I was at both openings. One was in Leicester, Mass., which is west of Worcester. The other is in Northampton. Those 2 stores had lines around the block, lots and lots of traffic. Fast forward 265 additional licenses later, we don't have the lines we used to have. We still have some parking issues in places they're difficult to park. But the industry has generated cumulatively from when those first 2 stores opened to a couple of months ago, $4 billion, with a B, $4 billion in sales. A percentage of that money goes to the state. A percentage, 3% local tax, goes to municipalities. So there's something in it for a community. I will say Newburyport's not alone in looking at saying, hey, maybe we should consider or reconsider whether or not we want to do retail. Tewksbury, where I grew up in the Merrimack Valley, is looking at opening up to 3 retails. I'm hearing Peabody may be considering that. Merrimack may be considering that. Other communities in Essex County and the rest of the Commonwealth are saying, why should those other towns next to us get all the benefit from their citizens who probably cross the border to go shop there? So I encourage you to, if you've never been to a cannabis shop, a retail shop, and you have some fears and some questions, you don't have to buy anything. You can go in. They'd prefer you buy something, but you can go in and ask questions. And I'd strongly encourage any of you to do that. The second slide is really just a summary, and I'm not going to read you slides because I hate when people do that. But the second slide is the 2017 cannabis legislation broken down. That gives you the overview, and it mentions the taxes, the 20% tax that's charged. Interestingly enough, other states have taxes that are a little less than that. Some states have it as high as in the 30%. One of the things that you need to consider when looking at a cannabis operator who runs a retail establishment, their competition, their direct competition is the illicit market, the black market, the underground economy, the underground market. There's no tax. There's no testing. There's no regulation. So anything that you find sold in a store in Haverhill or Amesbury or anywhere else in Essex County or around the state, heavily regulated by the Commission for public health and public safety. The next slide is the Massachusetts experience. Again, I'm not going to read it, but 267 retail licenses, over $4 billion in sales, $1.5 million a year in sales across the Commonwealth now. More and more stores opening up. Back to that initial slide, while there are 267 currently open retailers, the remaining number from that 469 that's listed there means that they're provisionally licensed, and if they raise the money and do their build out, they will open because the Commission has said, we are ready to approve you, you just need to raise the money, do your build out. So the Massachusetts experience slide, I encourage you to look at. I think it's very important to focus on the third bullet there. You have to have your ID checked 2 or 3 times at a cannabis shop. I think maybe once at a liquor store. Some liquor stores, not at all. We have not had a single incident of an under 21 person being served in a legal adult use cannabis shop in my time in this state that I've heard of. The next slide is the statistics of the sales that mentions the $4.13 billion since adult use sales began. It mentions the weekly, it mentions the daily, so take a look at that. This decision is going to be made by the citizenry and the city council. I don't live in Newburyport. I don't have a vote here. I would encourage you to look at all the facts when you're considering whether to move forward. And it's whether, because it's not, let's have a debate about whether we should have legalized as a state. That ship is sailed. That has already happened. I would encourage folks to keep an eye on what other communities are doing with their sales tax, the improvements, they're funding projects. I understand the city council has some business before it in the coming days that might need revenue. This is one source of new revenue that I'd strongly urge you to consider. The state law that passed back in 2017 allows each locality to have some, what they call local control. It allows you to determine the location, time, and manner of cannabis operations. So with that, I would say for anyone who's in a position of making policy, if you decide to do this in your city, is start with, where do you currently zone liquor stores, off-premises liquor stores? Start with that as your map. I know that people say, I don't want it in my neighborhood, they'll never rent to this guy or that gal. Start with that as your map and then say, okay, how many of these do we want to do? The Cannabis Control Commission has put out guidance from the very beginning that said each municipality, if they're going to allow retail, must allow a minimum number based on 20% of your off-premises liquor licenses. I was in touch with the ABCC, the Alcoholic Beverage and Control Commission, 2 days ago. They gave me the list for the whole state. I broke it down to see what Newburyport has. I think you have 9 off-premises active liquor licenses. And the way that Cannabis Control Commission has issued its guidance, 20% of 9 would be 1.4, you round, 1.8, you round up. So you would be eligible for a floor number of dispensaries. If you're going to do them at all, you must do at least 2. As a community, you can decide you want to do more than that, but if you are going to do retail at all as a community, you must do a minimum number of 2. And then lastly, I just wanted to show you a picture. Happens to be a local business who, also a member of Mass Cannabis Business Association, so I didn't think she'd mind me borrowing the picture of her interior of her retail, STEM Haverhill, which is this picture. Excuse me. I was at a retail establishment in Holyoke this morning. Holyoke's not the wealthiest community in Massachusetts. I think they have 5 retails right now. We were doing a tour with one of the Cannabis Control Commissioners before we held a roundtable discussion about the regulations in Massachusetts. And I asked the owners, I said, what did it cost to build out this establishment? They said, well, we had to gut it, and then we had to do the build out. I said, what was that all told to build it out? What was the budget? $1.5 million. These are businesses. This is not a hobby. This isn't people saying, hey, wouldn't it be nice to own a store? People who run these stores show up to work. They employ people. They fill an empty storefront. They pay taxes. They hire local vendors. They give back to their community. And if that's what Newburyport might want to consider moving forward, I hope you'll have an open mind about it. Jenny.
Thank you so much. Thank you, David. So, I'm not sure what kind of turnout we have here tonight because I can't really see the crowd, but that's all right. I do appreciate each and every one of you taking the time to come out and listen. And I would like the ability to address some concerns that I'm sure some of you may have. We know that in Newburyport, this has been a hot button issue in the past. We did, in 2019, have a non-binding referendum question presented to the community that did put a prohibition on the retail cannabis zoning. So that is what we have in place now. We have zoning in place, but there is a prohibition on it. Since that time, we have actually had the ability to wait and see what has occurred in every community around us. None of the fears have been realized. And to my very good recollection of the debate in 2019, when it was sent back to the City Council to act on the non-binding referendum, they were very clear on wanting to take a wait-and-see approach. They wanted to see how it would go in other communities first, and that we would revisit it after a few years of time had passed and we had something to look at. So I'm simply proposing that we look at the facts and what's actually occurred in the communities directly surrounding us. What we have not seen is any empty downtowns. We have not seen boarded up shops. We have not seen any kind of rise in crime or crime-riddled streets. We have not seen any of the standard sort of rhetoric that was very much based in the unknowns, as I said before. So what I would like to propose to the residents of Newburyport and to the City Council is that we take a new holistic look at this industry and what it's actually doing for the benefit of the communities that have accepted it. We can look at examples from neighboring communities that have combined efforts with their local retailers and many community efforts. Their collaboration and volunteerism and donations has been a very clear indicator that these businesses want to be an included part of the community and contribute to the community in an appropriate way, like many businesses choose to do. As far as the revenue goes and what's to be expected, now, we can probably agree that the baseline of 100,000, 150,000, 200,000 may not seem like it's going to solve all our problems, and some may even say it's a drop in the bucket. But what I would dispute to that is that when we're talking about bonding capital projects and how we're going to pay for projects that we need in the city, there is a deficiency in our funding sources. There is no new revenue coming into the city. Just the other night, a colleague of mine on the council stated that all we have left is development to depend on, bringing in more money to pay for things. That is a very scary thought to me. We have seen more development residentially than the city can sustain. So that's not an answer to me. To me is a big picture, looking outside the box, looking at what we don't have, what's working very well in other communities. And then I'm just asking for the opportunity for people to take a really hard look at the truth and the facts. We have just not seen the realization of the fears. So with that, I'd be happy to entertain questions of concern. I simply ask that you be respectful and keep it brief. And we will do our best to answer your questions, but I'm not looking to be attacked. And I know the feelings of many are feeling like they need to defend something, and I'm just not here to argue or be on the defense. So I'm happy to answer your questions. We have the podium to my right where you can step up and just state what your question or concern is, and I will do my best to address it. Does that sound good?
That works, sure. Anyone want to come up and share any thoughts, concerns, worries? Come on up.
I was to carry back here.
Yeah, we're just trying to capture what folks say because the media has asked if we'd do that, but just,
I respect what you're doing. I mean, I disagree. And I've been reading a lot about this. So the biggest negative impact that has taken place, not only in Massachusetts but other states, is the sale of illegal marijuana. So, and it makes perfect sense. You decided that Massachusetts legal retailers are paying an extra 20%. That just opens itself up for illegal business. So just the past couple of days, if you say, where are these sources? Wall Street Journal, New York Times, they had articles. In New York State, it's a disaster. They estimate there's 1,500 illegal stores selling it right now, and they can't keep up with it. California, they're losing money hand over fist because they just can't compete with the illegal market. They're actually trying to sell it to other states. So this, and I'm sure you're aware of this, but there's currently a lawsuit by the pot lobby they're paying an extra 20%. There's a lawsuit with the pot lobby to overturn the 10% state tax as well as the 3%. There's pot retailers that are actually suing the community saying, you know, we agreed to this 3%, but it doesn't make sense now, we can't compete, we want to overturn it. So my contention is that this revenue you're talking about at some point is going to go away. I mean, I think they'll win. I just don't know how you can saddle one company with 20%. They can't compete with that kind of tax. So the promises of revenue just aren't going to be there. Once you get pot stores in town, you will never get rid of them. So in your opening statement, there absolutely isn't been negative impacts. You can just read the news about it. In Massachusetts, particularly in Western Mass, where they've opened for a long time, the murders haven't gone up, but there actually has been an increase of crime. And I was just reading some of the articles that were taking place in Haverhill. You can say Haverhill's different, but We can debate the crime thing, but the biggest thing is the reason you want to open these pot stores is because of the extra revenue. I'm saying the revenue is going to go away because they are currently suing the state of Massachusetts for paying an extra 20%. And the biggest negative impact is it's driven illegal sales. Just go to the Wall Street Journal, go to New York Times. Illegal sales are just booming across the country. So you're creating a demand, and we're not making it any safer. All we're doing is driving demand for marijuana, and it's being satisfied by the illegal market because the legal market cannot compete with them. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So,
Come on up.
come on up. Do you want to address anything before?
No.
As speakers go? Okay.
Hi, I'm Lindy Lanfear, and I live here in Newburyport, and have for 30-some years. I am amazed that they have not heard any negative news about having retail stores in their town, because when I did a little bit of investigation, I found out that property values went down between 3% and 4% within a half a mile of a retail pot shop. Property taxes would be reduced more than any tax revenue this could raise. Bond ratings for cities with retail pot are usually lower. If we lost our AAA rating, it could cost the city several basis points on its debt, offsetting any revenue. In 2019, the city finance estimates between $100,000 and $150,000 of revenue. Now, there are many, many shops in neighboring towns, and why would others come here? The host agreement dream funds are gone due to pot shop lawsuits, which the other fellow just mentioned. Another cost to the city, we'll have to start paying for lawyers. Soon they will claim the city tax is inequitable, and Big Cannabis will be lobbying Beacon Hill to get rid of that tax too. There's no discussion of other costs to offset the revenues, like more policing or break-ins to pot shops in every city around us. And I can't believe you didn't know about that, because it's in the local paper. Prevention programs, because youth usage is higher in towns with shops. Retail pot is a money loser except for the businesses selling it. And those outside businesses are who is driving this whole issue. So I really hope that people consider this and just not add another vice to the city and more problems, with the hope that we would have more revenue. I don't think it's going to be more revenue, it's going to be less.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, everyone. I'm Sierra Gitlin. I'm a Newburyport resident most of my life. And Jenny, I just want to thank you for trying to bring this up with a rational voice, looking at facts. It's obviously been an emotional issue for many, but I do think, as a parent living in Newburyport, I have 2 kids here, 2 high school kids. I am concerned about them experimenting both with alcohol, with cannabis, with either of those. Just as I would prefer that they not try any of those, I am realistic. I think they might. I would rather them purchase alcohol at a legal alcohol store than drink some bathtub gin, just as I would rather them get legal cannabis from a legal source that was safe. Obviously, they're children, but if that was a probability or a possibility, I would rather the option of a safe source for that. And I think we can all agree on that. We all want to protect our children. That's the main concern, I think, of anybody. So I do think, looking at the facts, looking at what has happened in other towns, we don't see other towns trying to get rid of their stores. Nobody wants to get rid of them because they're valuable assets to the community. They're bringing in revenue. They're raising funds for charity. Over in Amesbury, there's a veteran-owned shop, employs many veterans. They're out there shoveling snow for the elderly. These are good citizens that are trying to operate businesses in our town, and I think we should try to be more welcoming. Thank you. Thanks, Jenny.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? No one else is coming
No
in?
one else? Everyone's
Hold
all
on.
set?
No, we got one more coming up.
Okay.
Hello, Jenny. Thanks for putting this on. I just want to say I'm massively in favor. The statistics, there's actually a lot of studies that say that property values go up in areas with cannabis dispensaries because a lot of money goes into like the build outs, and generally you're going to attract more like young, educated kind of people who come in and may bring culture and like music and art, stuff like that to a neighborhood, which is what makes property values go up. So, I mean, I haven't looked at the study that says that property values drop, but from what I've seen, like living in Seattle in the past, it's like when there's a cannabis shop, it just brings more like artists, culture, things like that. And I just wanted to bring this up because I know a lot of people are talking about like these big cannabis conglomerates coming in. Jenny, do you mind talking about the equity ordinance?
Not at all. Thank you so much for asking. So the equity ordinance that is now a new piece through the CCC allows for small businesses to get their foot in the door of this very large, very big industry that takes a great deal of capital and a very unfair margin for people that are not independently wealthy to get in the business. So the CCC has come up with a wonderful equitable licensure for small businesses, for women-run businesses, for minority-run businesses, and those licenses really do determine the type of retailer that comes in. And what I would be proposing in our community is a 2-year preferential sort of time period for those licensees that would essentially maintain the scope of our local economy with small businesses and mom and pop shops. That to me is a significant piece because it does keep our community in the same unique vein that we've always had of these small independent operated businesses. So that falls right in line, and that is something that I do plan on including in a proposal for the zoning. So thank you for bringing that piece up. And another item I think is significant to include about that particular type of licensee is that it is automatic to receive an additional % in tax revenue from the state if you have one of those licenses operating in your community. So that 3% tax becomes 4% automatically, which is certainly nothing to sneeze at. It does bring in a little bit more, and it also does keep the feel of our small town, our small city, and the uniqueness of our small businesses in check. So that is part of it. Thank you for bringing that up. I appreciate it.
Yeah, just a note about the 20% tax at the register, if you will. So when you pay for your product at an adult use retail establishment, they tack on 20%. 3% of that is the local sales tax. That comes back exclusively to the community to spend any way they want in the general fund. I think what was mentioned by an earlier speaker is another 3% on top of the 20%, which is the host community agreement. This is something I feel, I'm not a licensed operator, so it's not my money that I'm losing, but every one of the open businesses in Massachusetts have to enter into what they call a host community agreement, which speaks to the time, manner, and place where you'll run your business. And it was done in fear. It was passed back in 2017 when I told you the legislation passed. It was to be put into place to cover extra expenses that a municipality might have to bear for hosting a cannabis retail. What might that include? Police details, having to put a new traffic light in because there was so much traffic there that we just couldn't handle it on that main street. There is a lawsuit currently, there's several lawsuits actually, of operators, licensed cannabis operators suing their host communities because imagine getting a bill from your city or town and you had signed an agreement with them that said, I'll pay all the extras that I make you have to pay on my behalf as the municipality. They send you a bill for the 3%, but they don't give you detail. It'd be like getting a water bill for $1 million, and you say, what? There's no way I used all this water. Like, well, I think you did. Give me the $1 million. That's what these operators are fighting. They entered into an agreement and said, I'll cover extra costs. I'll pay them out of my pocket as the business, but only the extra costs, and only those that are reasonable, like traffic, police details, striping the sidewalk. Certainly not guns and holsters for the police department. We've done 2 different analyses on this for the industry. Communities have collected over $50 million over the course of time since adult use has passed. And if you're okay paying a bill without detail or without receipts, I can't imagine any of you are. That's what they're standing up for themselves. The 17% is not going anywhere. It was passed by the legislature. It was actually 28% when they were negotiating it back in 2017. The Senate had a bill that was 28%. The House had a 12%, or maybe the other way around. And they settled on 20, right in the middle. That's not going away, not in Massachusetts. I've lived here my whole life. There's a reason it's called Taxachusetts. Taxes don't go down, they go up. And it's true in cannabis as well.
Anyone else have a question or concern? Please come up to the podium so we can hear you.
Hi, my name is Connie Preston. I actually am an at-large city councilor here in town. I'm guessing that we maybe anticipated a little bit more discussion, and since it doesn't seem, I have a few questions. I don't know if this is the right form or not, so tell me if it's not.
Feel free.
But so firstly, you, and this is purely fact gathering on my part, but you mentioned the number of licenses within each county. So Essex County has 34 licenses. Do you know particularly how many stores there are in Essex County?
22.
22. Thank you.
So that number, the 34 that the commission publishes on a monthly basis, is everything they've approved, but not all fully open. So
Yep.
some of those are provisionally licensed, which is they just have one more step to go before they open,
Okay.
but they're technically approved by the commission.
Okay.
So they're in the queue.
So that was more curiosity on my part than anything. But so my second question relates to sort of the zoning regulations in terms of proximities to schools and those sorts of things. I know one of the places that I believe Councilor Donahue is looking to zone for this is the downtown. I was very involved in the discussion a few years ago, and there are some signals that there could be complications with some of the downtown in terms of the zoning regulations. My question would really be, do you foresee those sorts of regulations changing in any sort of short term, or do you feel that those are relatively steadfast?
So that's up to each community. So I think one of the things you might have been referencing, and just for sort of conversation's sake, I want to let everyone know that there is a 500-foot buffer from K through 12, public or private schools. It's in the state law. As a community, you can make that smaller if you choose to.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't actually realize
And
that.
many communities that are densely packed downtown say, well, this isn't, looking at a map, this isn't going to work. Let's lessen that, because the K through 12 public school is, many sort of streets away and through alleys and that sort of thing. There's no clear line of sight.
Yep.
So some communities have chosen to lessen that.
Yeah, one of our major concerns is we do have a Montessori school right in the middle of downtown, which is within a 500-foot radius of many of the potential shops. And then lastly, again, more my curiosity, I guess. But so I recently heard an article on NPR about market saturation as a whole, so specifically the Northampton example. Do you feel the market is saturated?
Northampton certainly is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the mayor's a good friend. I've known him for 20-plus years, and at some point, the cannabis consumer pie, people who will purchase at retail, maxes out. And if you're in a smaller community like Northampton, doing a dozen out there was probably too many at the end of the day, and one of them just closed. There are some communities that start off and say, we're going to do just our bare minimum, we're going to do 2 or 3, and then over time have added 1 or 2. So if you're the only town in a region that's open and there's sort of cannabis desert around you, you're going to do well for a while. But as competition comes on, the pie gets subdivided, right? I mean, you can bake a new pie, but it's probably the state next door to you that's baking the new pie, if you're on the border. So do I think we're at saturation for the state? Not if you look at a map, because population centers along 93, for example, there's a whole lot of banned communities there that are saying, you know what, maybe we should take a look at this, to opening up to it. Essex County, I think, is the 3rd most populous county in the Commonwealth, 3rd or 4th. By some rough numbers that I just looked at, I think you are 7th or 8th in retail establishments open for cannabis. So arguably, your citizenry wants to shop, I think, closer to home. Now, if you're going out to the Berkshires, you're going down the Cape, that's more of a destination. But why do they go to the local liquor store? Because it's convenient,
Yeah.
right?
Well, it's a fair point, because I was going to sort of push a little further, because we are already seeing the pushback of saying we have shops in Amesbury, we have shops in Salisbury, we have shops in Rowley, why do we need them in Newburyport? How would you respond to that?
Well, your people are going there to buy. I mean, I would be very surprised if your community has no cannabis consumers. So currently, they're going somewhere else for their purchasing.
I'd like to also, if that's okay, speak to that.
Of course.
So it's not all just, totally one-sided. So yeah, I do feel that the populace of Newburyport could sustain at least 1 or 2 cannabis shops safely and comfortably, and there would be profit. I think that our residents, while we do conveniently have a 15-minute drive across the border to another neighboring community, it does then beg the question of equal access and why we should have to actually leave town with our money to spend. I mean, we have a very thriving local business community that we're constantly encouraging folks to shop local, stay in town, keep your tax dollars in town. So there's kind of, for me, that's the premise, is that we do have consumers in this community, and they're taking their money elsewhere. And like with any product, it's convenience. And as stated, we go to the local liquor store because it's around the corner from where we live. So it's essentially that same premise, is just that treating it equally.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I can't recall myself ever driving all the way to Amesbury to get a bottle of wine when I could get it a couple blocks away from
Exactly.
myself. So that's fair. All right, I have no more questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Connie. I appreciate your questions.
Connie, one more thing as you're walking back that I'd add is charitable giving for a retail store in a community, whether it's here or one of the other communities. If they're really charitable, they're giving to the host community they're in, nonprofits and that sort of thing. Maybe they're giving to adjoining towns as well, if they had a good year. But if you're located in a town, you're much more likely to be charitable to that town or that city. So that's, I didn't lead with the revenue argument. We mentioned it, but I'm not leading with it. It's not going to solve the world's problems by opening up 2 cannabis shops here. I'm not saying that. But there's an upside, an absolute upside. There's jobs, there's revenue, there's filling an empty storefront, there's local vendors that are going to be hired. You can impress upon people that you want them to score higher if you're going to do any kind of a process, if it's not by right, to say, we really encourage you to hire local and tell us what you're going to do for the charities here. And if it's an existing operator who's already doing that in another community and they can say, I'll do better than telling you what I'm doing. I'll bring those charities with me to say, this is what we already do in community. How can you ask for a better operator than that? I mean, you'd ask that of any other business coming to town. You should ask about it for cannabis as well.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Oh, Connie again.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't mean to dominate, but since nobody else is getting up.
No, I appreciate it.
So, I think somewhere else we're going to hear a lot of discussion is the fact that we had a referendum, right? And the referendum, well, it was close, it was 52 to 48%. The referendum was to opt out of having retail cannabis in Newburyport. How would you react to the argument of why should we revisit this again? The citizenry has spoken to this, and, why should we revisit this?
Thank you so much for that question. I will touch on that again, absolutely, because it's very valid, and it's a poignant question on a lot of the minds of Newburyport residents that are, sort of under that impression that we voted this down. Well, we did vote for a non-binding referendum in 2019 to opt out, and as I said, that was a decision made by the city council at the time to act upon or not. And I do clearly remember the end of the day argument was that we were going to take a slow approach and revisit it when we've had something to look at. So that's what I would essentially respond to, is that we were basically promised the opportunity to revisit this in a few years when some time had passed and the results were in. So I do think it's time. I don't see any reason to wait. It's been 3 years since that non-binding referendum was put to the public. So that is primarily why I'm proposing to revisit this now, at a time when I've spent a year and a few months on the council arguing about how to fund necessities in the community and prioritize things like the future of our youth. It's a hard argument, and when you don't have any new revenue streams to point to, it's really hard to make those decisions. So to me, this is a sort of two birds with one stone. We're constantly trying to figure out how to fund projects and how not to outdo our bonding or overdo our bonding. I would definitely be interested to see any actual data that does say that you could lose your bond rating with a cannabis city. I've never heard any true statistic of that, so I'm interested where that piece of information may have surfaced from. But beyond that, we're just saying no based on the unknowns of 2019 that are still in people's minds. So we're really just trying to present what has occurred since the city opted out, and that none of those fears have been realized in any community that really registers on the bar of actual impact. So it's not to say that there haven't been incidents in some communities, an incident here, an incident there. Those do get reported to the CCC, and of course we see them in the paper. But they are truly one-off instances. These are not continuous instances like you see, well, with liquor stores, with pharmacies, with banks, with jewelry stores. I mean, they all have crime-related incidents on a much higher level. The cannabis industry is not seeing that level that registers for actual impact. Sorry to sort of go off a little bit separately from that, but thank you again for that question. That is what my approach would be.
So just a couple of things. First, I think it's legal. It's here. It's it is what it is. It's fine. But just to reiterate, we went through like vigorous debate here in our city about if we wanted it. It got dicey, and people said no. So I think that's to just dismiss that is foolish. But
I'm not
I have a question for you, Dave.
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of concerns. Thank you for pointing out you have to get show your ID to get in. That's great. That'll help your kids not get it. That's awesome. My question to you is number of my concerns. One of my big concerns is the Cannabis Control Committee kind of continuing to move the goalposts, right? So if we decide, all right, we're going to have 2 pot shops, because we decided we have to have 2 downtown. If we have 2, and then they change the rules and say, well, now you can sell it in coffee shops, or you could sell it in, right. So as the laws changed and they moved the goalposts, today what we're just saying is, oh, we could just have 2, but in 10 years, it could be in every other shop downtown. And for me, just, normalizing it for kids, I think somebody else said it tonight, that in every community that has it, there's higher use rates in kids. That's just a fact. So my question to you was just about moving, like a really serious question about moving the goalposts. People, they're changing the rules along the way, and once you say you're in, you're in for whatever they decide, right?
I got a deal for you. I'll answer
Sure.
your question if
Yeah.
you answer mine.
Sure.
I'll answer yours first, and then I'll ask mine.
Yeah.
The changing of the rules and having it sold everywhere, that's state law. The Cannabis Control Commission implements state law. They write regulations about state law, so the legislation, the legislature handles that. That's not happening, I don't think, in my lifetime in Massachusetts. I don't ever see that happening here.
See what happening, I'm saying.
It being available everywhere. I mean, it's still federally legal. There's 20-some states where it's legal. So have you been into a shop?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You see the cameras and the vaults and the
Oh, yeah.
the expense that they have to build out. I mean, it's like Fort Knox.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit. I think what
I'd
you
like
said
to add
was
to
that.
his answer as well, if that's okay. Massachusetts is probably one of the strictest, most regulated states of cannabis sales. So we took things slow. We debated for a very long time on what the right thing to do in the state was. And honestly, we're not going backwards.
Exactly. So, and we voted. So let's go forward. And this is a great community. And I have my wife will get gummies. She gets them for my dog sometimes. It's great. But the city of Newburyport said, we have this great community culture. People come from all around. We could get more tax revenue if the city council could figure out how to get a hotel in town than
Agreed.
from pot shops, right? And we can forward you information on the bond rating, because that is a fact. And the crime, we can get you that information as well, because those are all facts. So thank you, Dave, for answering the question.
I didn't ask mine, though.
Oh, sure.
So you said youth usage is higher where there is an open retail?
Youth usage is higher
In community-
in states and communities that have retail.
I'd love to see
marijuana.
that citation.
Yeah, I'll get it for you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Other thoughts, questions, concerns? Come on up.
I don't need to walk up there, but I just wanted to ask, how invested are you two in this industry? And can I ask how much you're making by being involved with it and by promoting it in other towns?
Yeah.
Not even living?
Jenny, do you want to go first?
Sure, just so I have that clear and on record, you would like to know what Mr. O'Brien is paid and what we are both invested in? Is that correct?
Why did you come out tonight to try to push this on Newburyport?
Me personally?
Yeah, both of you.
Well, I'd like to think that folks have actually been listening to what I've said tonight, but I'm happy to repeat myself if necessary. This is something that the City Council acted on in 2019 to be fair to the democratic process through the non-binding referendum question. They did not have to, but they were pressured and bullied, to be honest. And I witnessed that bullying myself, and it was quite deplorable. And the scare tactics were also deplorable. So a lot of the fear-mongering did absolutely win. But none of it has actually occurred. So I have no stake in this game. I am a working-class resident of this community, raised in this community. I pay taxes on my property. And I'm simply asking for us to revisit what the city council promised would be revisited after we had some years to look at what actually has occurred. I don't think there's anything wrong with that when we're constantly, as I said, trying to determine how we're going to fund our basic needs in the city. To say no to any legal revenue is just foolish in any amount, because it's based on fears of what people think it's going to be. So I have no stake in this game. Thank you.
You might want to remind everybody that you are the Ward 2 City Councilor.
Yes, and it is a point to be made that what I'm anticipating proposing is relative to my ward, which is Ward 2. This is a very diverse ward of businesses. I am not planning to propose it in the wards that voted no in 2016 out of fairness. I am listening to every reasonable question and concern, and I'm addressing it with the truth and facts. I can't make it any clearer. Now, David O'Brien here should be treated with the same amount of respect as we would treat Nate Allard if he was here from the Chamber of Commerce, because that is his business. He is here to give us the facts of an industry that is very heavily controlled and regulated. So it was my hope to answer questions, to make it clear that this is not a personal agenda for me. This is not what I ran to do. I was vocally opposed to opting out in 2016 as a member of the community. That's no secret. So I may be accused of withholding this as I campaigned for Ward 2, but again, I would point to the fact that it was no secret that I supported it. And I have campaigned on very good and legitimate premises that I have followed through on for my ward. So again, just trying to give our city the proper and fair opportunity that we see in all of our surrounding communities that are thriving. I hope that answers your question. I'm not being paid anything, by the way. I'm a volunteer to the city with a lovely little stipend that adds up to about 15 cents an hour. So, and David's not being paid by anyone to be here. He's here as a member of the Cannabis Chamber of Commerce for the state.
And I'm here because I was asked to come here and hopefully enlighten people about what's happened in Massachusetts. We don't have to agree on things, but to impugn someone's character and ask if I'm being paid to be here, I'd rather be home sitting on the couch with my wife watching a TV show, quite frankly. But I thought we might be able to share what's happened across the Commonwealth, what things have worked, what things haven't worked. It hasn't been perfect, but sky didn't fall. You can keep yelling at the sky and hoping it falls, but
It's just not happening.
267 open retail, $4 billion in sales. $4 billion. That's not a theory. That's not just a bunch of potheads. It's people, it's your neighbors. It's people you know in the community. You don't have to like it. I don't drink. I barely do edibles to sleep. I'm not doing this for the free samples. But if you're going to do it, make policy with your eyes wide open. That's all.
Did anyone else have any questions or concerns that would like to come up to the mic?
Actually, I just have one other question. Dave, thank you for coming. I mean, you've done.
Thank you.
It is a fair.
Appreciate
debate,
that.
Right? I mean,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
It is legal and people use it. That's great. No, I think just to further your question is just, if you volunteered to come here tonight, that's great. Can you just clarify what your job is and how you're like, right? You're not a mechanical engineer by day. I'm just wondering.
No, I run the Massachusetts Cannabis Business Association. I meet with policymakers. This morning I was in Holyoke meeting with Commissioner Kimberly Roy of the Cannabis Control Commission. And we meet,
Just want to clarify exactly what your role
Yeah. No, we meet with policymakers, some of whom are in this room. Jenny's a policymaker in your community. She said, hey, we're looking at doing this. I said, ironically, I was in Newburyport back in 2019. That's where I first met Bruce and some of the counselors who are still on the council from then, to say, this is what we know. This is what we don't know. At that point, there was a lot more we didn't know. There's a lot more now that we know. I'm just trying to, to bring that to the decision-making table, that's all. I don't have a vote in this. I don't live here. It's a beautiful community. We've come up here to dinner. I'm not trying to save your community or ruin your community. Just trying to share knowledge, that's all.
Anyone else?
Yep, got another one coming up.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me on there? My name is Molly Manuel. I'm a almost lifelong resident. I wasn't born here in Anna Jakes, but I grew up in this town. And I'm also a cannabis consumer. So if you want to see who the demon is, I'm right here. Hi. I work. I pay my taxes. I'm a law-abiding citizen. And I also like money. You all like money? I like money. I like money for my community. And there was a point they were talking about earlier that I thought was interesting about, you know, the pie that's divvied up and how we only have a finite amount of users. And for the most part, that's true. A lot of other communities, they only have so many people who are going to visit these stores. We have a really unique situation here in Newburyport. We're a destination. People come here from literally all over the world. And they come from other countries, other states that don't have marijuana, so, or at least don't have it legal. So why wouldn't we want to give the opportunity to those visitors to get real, safe, legal marijuana here in Newburyport? Why are we letting other towns take revenue that we could be having right here? As I said, the sky hasn't fallen. Society hasn't crumbled. All of us legal cannabis users are still doing what we always do. We're not here to, you know, poison your children or, you know, ruin your whole life. We're just here to, you know, live our lives, and that's it. And, you know, I don't see the point in this ridiculous fear-mongering and, you know, saying that this is the end of our civilization here in this little piece of you know, town that we live in. So, I don't know. I'm just tired of hearing silliness. Let's get real. Let's look at what's the benefits are here. And I see way more benefits than I see detractors at this point. So that's it. Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Molly. Are there comments, thoughts?
Questions?
Yep, got another one coming up.
Hi, everyone. I am a mom to one-year-old twins. I am also a youth basketball and softball coach. I've worked with kids for about 8 years, and I'm also 31. So it wasn't that long ago that I was in high school. And I will say, when I was in high school, it was a lot easier to find cannabis than it was to find alcohol, because I knew kids that were, not that I even consumed it, I actually was a really good kid, and I didn't start using cannabis until college, but I can tell you there were kids that were selling it, there were kids that had entire business models as high schoolers selling cannabis, and those kids, a lot of them, some of them went on to get themselves out of that, some of them went on to sell harder drugs. People that sell large amounts of cannabis on the legacy market, some of them aren't good people, they don't check your ID, they are totally open to sell people underage larger amounts of cannabis if they have the money, and those kids sell to your kids. So as a parent and as a coach, I'd so much rather have cannabis sold somewhere that it's age gated. I can tell you that that legacy market has been decimated by legal cannabis. The money's not there for people anymore. So if you look into the community, the positive effects for children, to have it out of the hands of people selling it around them, to have it in an age-gated community where it's a lot harder to access, is a good thing. And like I said, when I was younger, cannabis, kids were smoking it everywhere. It was all throughout the public high school. I went to a private high school, but and the public kids I knew, it was so easy for them to get. And alcohol was incredibly difficult. And I know that it's starting to change, or that's going to start happening. So it's a positive thing. I know it's hard to think of it that way, but it's everywhere in the community. And if we can get it out and put it in age gated, it'll be positive for the children. Thank you.
Thank you. Other thoughts, questions, concerns? Jenny, thanks for having me here tonight. Appreciate it.
So I'll just end quickly with a last remark of sort of what to expect next steps for me. I will continue to have these conversations with anyone that reaches out. You can reach me directly via my city email, jdonahue@cityofnewburyport.com. My phone number is also on the city website. I'm very approachable, very reasonable, not looking to fight or argue, just provide facts. And please do stay tuned for what's going to be coming out in the coming months in terms of my proposal to the council. When I have that posted publicly, I'm happy to answer more questions and clarify any questions regarding that specifically. But this is just to get the conversation started and essentially answer a lot of questions right away as to why now and why here. And I hope I've accomplished that to some degree for some of you. And I thank you also very much for taking the time out to come listen to us tonight.